good evening, welcome. It is, what are we up to? We're up to 17, CodeZone episode 17. Who'd have thought that? And we've got in the chat so far, we've got Magetsa, we've got Morris, we've got Anwan. Sorry, Danikon, you weren't first. Anwan was technically first tonight. Dersej, hello. Morris, hello. Danikon, yes, not first. Right, so despite the incredibly boring title of tonight's stream, I think it's actually one of the most fundamental things that we need to implement in the whole of the game. Because if we can't select things, then we can't initiate further actions. We can't go on to build space stations. We can't place markers. We can't select ships. We can't do any kind of interaction with the project. So I think it's important that we nail the object selection. And I'm not going to do it in a particularly clever way. Basically, I'm going to detect where my mouse is in the world, and if my entities have a selectable property, then somehow we'll relate the two. I guess if we had thousands of objects, we'd want to look at other sort of spatial partitioning systems. But, yeah, I'm not too bothered. Right, who else have we got here? Saucy63, hello. Mycon, ahoy. Apostolisk, hello. Ah, good, the VIP thing sticks. Gruffler, hello. And I don't know if Adam Wolf is in the Twitch chat, but they left a message in the CodeZone chat on the Discord server, and it reads this: in addition to building stations, is building ships on the list? Seems like the same system could be used for both, only swapping out the components. Well, I don't know. Possibly. I do quite like the idea of building ships, but then does it become a game about building ships rather than sort of building logistics? I mean, what are the ships going to do that's different? Or is it going to be too challenging to have ships that behave differently depending on where you've placed their components? I could just about tolerate that you have different sized cargo ships, or maybe you can equip weapons or different engines of different speeds. So maybe there will be a bit of ship customization, but it wasn't going to be a main point of the game. That said, you're right, the satellite building system could be used for building ships too. Spatial partitioning like BSPs. Potentially, yeah, quad trees, anything like that. Truton is. Good evening, yes, hello. I've got plain old just water tonight. And on my screen, you can see a rather interesting error. Well, it's actually a warning from Visual Studio, and I've not been able to wrap my head around it. It says here that the I is less than 1000 is invalid. And if I put my cursor over it, just in case that's a bit too small for you to read on the stream, it says function definition for emplace back not found. So I don't know how it's drawn a line between those two things, but it managed. So I don't know. Is it water? Is it vodka? Who knows? Hermes, hello. Dwoop Paint 12. Right, so let's get stuck in. Where did we get... oh dear, here we go. Here come the coughs. Where did we end last time? And last time we ended with a game decider, didn't we? And I was really pleased that so many of you stuck around for the game decider. It's a bit of silliness. I'm not going to do it every time, but it's just it's fun once in a while. The Chazegg, yes, you are on time. And Space Thing hype indeed. Space Thing is slowly becoming actually space with definition. That was it. We ended up with sort of planets whizzing all over the place, didn't we? Totally incoherent, but it was quite cool just to see what was going on. Yes, lots of dots. It's a shame that the planets relative to the sun are so small. Well, we'll keep them whizzing around because that's a useful thing to test some sort of selection tool. It did occur to me when I was driving home that actually how easy is it going to be to select the things that you want to interact with if they're always moving? And you've got to remember the things on the whole are going to be moving pretty slowly. So I stopped worrying about it pretty quickly. What am I doing? I want to slow down time first, that's it. So we need to go down to on-user update. On-user update. Where are we drawing? On-user update. Getting there. There we go. That was it. So we'll slow down time by a factor of 1,000. So basically everything will be dead still, but that's okay. There we go. So even though everything's dead still, things are slightly moving. I can't remember what the criteria was for the speed of rotation. We might have just set it to a random number. Good. Well, that will do for our tests tonight. Julian Nichols, hello. Alex, hello. I'm a proponent of the many worlds theory. Will there be another game decided tonight? No, I don't think so. Not tonight. Speedy, hello. Dragoneye, hello. How is walking about in Elite going? Are people enjoying that? I don't know if I would. So I think we'll start by adding a selectable component. Now, I don't know what you do in Ent when you want a component to just exist, but by virtue of having the component, it has the component. That's you'll see what I mean in a minute. That's not very clear. But for selectable here, do I need to store a Boolean flag in there to say that it's a selectable object? Or I've chosen to put it's selected at the moment. Whether we use it or not, I don't know. And it has its own radius. Now, whether it should just take the radius of the object that it is, I don't know. We may have to change around with these things later on. But for now, we need to at least attach that component to our entities. So let's start there. What are we generating? And we're not going to make the sun selectable. The sun is the one thing that you can't do anything with in the game, I think. I think that's a good restriction to have. Well, your planets, yes, here we go. So we've added the component for comp planet, so we just want to add a selectable. There we go. But we do need to specify the same radius. I have to have a think about that too. So don't forget, those that have just joined us, I'm still figuring out Ent a little bit. So I'm probably not doing everything in the most optimal way at the moment. So that's a selectable. And we specified that it should have a radius, which I think was this second parameter, wasn't it? So I'm going to need to... that's interesting. How do I get that value that I've just created? Now, I have actually read back on a planet before, and that was down in one of the drawing routines. Now, without using a view, that was it. Let's just grab that for a second. So I'm going to duplicate this radius property, which is not right. It's not the right thing to do. But I want to get the fact that it is a planet. Oh, square bracket limit. Planet. Like so. And once I've got that component, come on, there we go. Then I can p dot... Yes, I can get the radius. Now that's probably grossly inefficient and really not the recommended way to do that. If anything, this is a suggestion that radius should indeed be a component of its own for all of these things. So this is a nasty hack. So I'm going to put a little flag here to remind me that this is a grotesque and horrible hack to make this work. Thank you, Magetsu. It's very kind of you. Sorry for calling you a nerd earlier. Fiji, who took my name? Howdy. Hello. Yes, live. Occasionally I go live. Yes, grotesque and horrible hacks. And yes, I don't necessarily assume that because I'm doing it that I'm doing it in a good way. That's a common misconception, that people just think I actually plan these things. I'm just literally bumbling my way through this code. So we've added a selectable object to it. We've given it a radius. I also probably need to set that to false to specify that the object is not selected. I think that is going to come back to haunt us a little bit later down the line. But let's see how we're going. Now, so is a candidate for something that should be selected, I guess needs to be highlighted in a way. Now that's interesting because yes, okay, right. So let's go back to our drawing routines for the render the actual planets. So planets. There we go. So I'm going to get its position, and I'm going to get whether it's a planet, and now I'm also going to get its component based on selectable. And if selectable is set to true, then I will probably want to draw something in addition to indicate that the planet is selected. Don't know what that's going to be yet, really, because we're working in decal space. Drawing in the sprite space isn't going to work very effectively. Hurdle Dance, hello. So I think, for now, I think I'll just draw another decal on top. Stretch it by the radius. And set the decal mode to additive. And we'll try and just sort of enhance its contrast and colour a little bit. Okay, let's try that. So PG, set decal mode. We'll see decal mode additive. Let's go with that. And because we're monkeying about with the decal mode, let's also remember to set it back to normal. Once we've set that, now we want to draw something. So I'm going to take the... For now, I'll just draw the same layer again. No, we won't. Let's try and do some of this properly. I need to find assets. I'm just wondering if I've got sort of an asset which I can abuse for this. I don't think we have, really. Planet atmosphere, maybe. Yes, because I use planet atmosphere and shadow. Star sky. Star surface, there we go. Have a look at star surface. That's just a big white disk. Perfect. Right, that's what we'll use. Star surface for selection of planets. So I need to go and find where have I thrown that in my pool of resources. What did I call it? Already forgotten. It was called star surface. That was so clever of me. Star surface. There we go. So I'm going to use that just because it's a disk, and it's a disk that we can colour. Now, most of the things we're going to be selecting are indeed disks. Oh, I need to add a thing here, don't I? Selectable. So if selectable dot, there we go, be selected, that's when we want to do this. We don't want to do it otherwise. And I want to take exactly the same rotated decal drawing code. And the decal we're going to do is not any of that anymore. It's new stuff. We've not actually added the asset stuff, have we? The planet asset stuff into our asset pool. Let's take the name of it anyway. And go back down to drawing. Okay, we've got the pool dot get by name. Yeah, don't quite like that. I think we probably do want to cache this as something permanent, because otherwise it's doing this sort of string hashing every single time. Not good. But for now, we'll just make it work. Then we're going to scale it to be the same size as everything else. And the actual point of rotation, it's not going to rotate, doesn't matter. That's okay. I can get rid of that, can't I? Don't need that. And the tint, just so we can see it potentially. Let's set the tint to be OLC magenta. We like magenta. Let's see what happens with that. Right, so the idea is anything that's got a selectable element that's set to true on top of... where was it? Render planets. Here we go. Then we're going to draw this sort of special decal disk, which should illuminate the thing that we've selected. I don't know. We'll see if it works. I think your stream is wonderful at illustrating the hard work behind the scenes. Oh, well, thank you very much. I think that says FJLJ, who took my name. No, I appreciate that. What are we abusing tonight? Well, just water, I'm afraid. But we're abusing a nasty hack. Dandasine, you're an Ent user. Just started being an Ent user. One of the things that I've decided to do is break the Ent paradigm by... Let's go and find that code. Sort of self-referencing the object. Here we go. You'll like this one. So we're creating our loop of planets. We create the planet... and then to actually go and get one of the components back off the planet whilst we're creating it in order to steal and duplicate a radius. Everything about it is wrong, but it will serve a purpose. Didn't you modify the wrong position? Don't know. Need more information than that. There's so many positions now, I can't keep track of these things. Well, I guess the sensible way to do this is to create the component object properly as just a struct that I populate and then give it to both things. But as we discussed earlier, the whole point is I think the radius needs to become a component on its own. You could have... Oh, congrats on fatherhood. It's a heck of a ride, but well worth it. Thank you very much. Yes, we're looking forward to it. You could have an event that auto adds a selectable when you add to planet component. Ah, hang on. Somebody's... Yes, I'm catching up with the chat there. Julian's quite right, because I'm barely awake tonight. Oh dear, okay, right, we've made a small mistake here. Let's pinch that. And we'll just create a copy of you, and we'll do a little bit of undoing. There we go. Right, and this one is actually down here. There we go. Put you there. That's, I think, what we want. Good call. Send that guy $1. Vuvov, hello. Did I not control Z enough? Oh, well, that would have been caught out by the compiler. You don't get any money for that one. Right, let's just see if anything compiles at the moment. We've added a few bits of code. Let's see what happens. And then I think we need to actually start bringing the mouse into this and working out which planets have we actually got the mouse sort of hovering over. Good. And let's just default them to true. That way we can just see if the rendering is working. Where is it? I've already lost my place. There we go. So if we set the selected state already to be true... Yeah, okay. They become giant pink balls. Perfect. That looks pretty cool. Oh, they're all twinkling on my high resolution there. That's nice. Twinkling pink balls. Very good. I don't see, Danderstein. I don't like the idea of necessarily changing which components belong to an entity at runtime. I don't. That doesn't sit right with me. I know I can do it, but I just don't feel that that's kind of the right approach. No, not for something that's so in flux that it's literally every frame that state's going to be changing. I don't know. Not so sure on that. Velma, you saw my YouTube videos, Mr. Code Boy. Well, thank you. Right, so, yes, what we're doing? Mouse. That's what we need. Mouses. So how are we going to handle this? We're going to need another system, aren't we, that can go through... Basically, I'm going to brute force this. I'm just going to say, if the mouse coordinate is within the radius of the planet at that particular position, then I want to set it selectable. And then we'll do it when we actually click, because I think that's the next stage. And that's where we'll start thinking about the state machines again. So let's create another system. I'm going to grab this system as a bit of a starting point. System. Select. Selectables. And we'll pass into that a mouse coordinate. I think it might be time to split this up into multiple files. It was probably time to do that 16 episodes ago. First time catching a stream. Cheers from Mexico. Wow, Mexico. Okay, I don't think we've got any other Mexican viewers. Caesariux. Sounds like me naming stuff. Yeah, I'm not. Naming stuff live is more difficult than off stream. So, what are we grabbing here? We're grabbing the position. We don't care if it's an orbit. All we want to do is just grab if it's a selectable. Does it have the quality of being able to be selected? And what do we do if that's the case? So we've got to do a test. Now this is where we were thinking before. It's probably sensible when you've got lots of objects to start partitioning the space up. I'm not going to do that today. It's complicated. So I just really want to brute force it. That way we can move forward and start doing state machines. So I guess what we're looking for is if... we've got the vMouse position. That's going to be in world space, isn't it? World mouse. We'll get that transformed when we call this function. So basically I'm just checking that the selectable object selectable dot be selected is equal to the difference between vMouse world. Take the selectable dot. Oh no, not that one. Sorry, we want pos dot vpos. That's the wrong way around, isn't it? It's a good start. Take all of you dot mag2 function, which will give us the hypotenuse but squared, and we want to make sure that you're less than or equal to the selectable dot. I don't know why my IntelliSense is so slow tonight. Look at that, it's really slow. D radius times selectable dot D radius. Yeah, IntelliSense is taking its time tonight. That's not an error. I don't like that many for loops which iterate over the same objects. Yeah, I think that's an interesting observation, and I think I agree with you. I've noticed that too, that you're sort of potentially wasting loop time. But the idea is that you gain the advantage that you're going through the loops very, very quickly because everything is organised in memory very contiguously and very linearly. So that's where you're supposed to get the speed up. Now, there may be some optimization that we can make in order to not have to loop through everything all the time. And one of the other big optimizations I think that you can make sensibly is you don't need to do everything every frame. I can selectively choose which ones are more relevant to do on each frame. So there are some I have to do on every frame, like the rendering ones, so that's important. But the selectable stuff, it doesn't really matter. Because as a human, I'm not going to operate at 1,000 frames per second. I'm barely going to operate at 30 frames per second, so I think I can get away with not having to do this every single frame. Exactly, you could only check selectables on click. Well, what I'm going for right now is sort of a highlight thing. And, well, I'm setting everything to selected if that's the case or not. So we're going to basically highlight all of the objects as soon as my mouse cursor goes over them. And when my mouse cursor stops being over them, then they're going to become unhighlighted. So we're just going to test to see if that works. So I think we want now to do this somewhere. Where are we going to do this? We need to do the simulation. So the simulation, I guess this is part of the simulation. Probably should do it before we render anyway. tv.get, whoa, hang on, get, I think we want to do screen to world. That was it, didn't we? Screen to world. And the coordinate we're going to put in, and thank you, Tarry, we'll never let you live that down, is get mouse pos. So that should give us our mouse coordinate in the screen space, which will then get converted to the world space, which then gets fed into the system to check and compare it with the planets. And set the selectable flag. Have I missed a bracket? No. IntelliSense being slow. What space thing are you doing? We're trying to build a sort of a space simulation, and it's going to be a bit like SimCity, potentially a bit like Anno. You know, we're making it up as we go along. A bit of community involvement, people throwing ideas out here and there. Right, well that looks good, although the radius looks not good. I've got a feeling that we're drawing these planets at the radius and not the diameter. But nonetheless, we are highlighting them. It might not actually be a bad thing to have a bit of an overlap like that, because when the planets are quite small, you probably do want a bit of a grace zone. I mean, we could go ahead and correct this and make it accurate, but I think what's happening is the planets are... Yeah, basically, at some point we've got a diameter and a radius mixed up. I'm guessing it's to do with the scaling of the decal. Now, we've got two planets that are somewhat overlapping. There. Can't see if there's any sort of close to being... Oh, there we go. Okay, no, I quite like that. I think that's a nice way of sort of highlighting things. Obviously there'll be sound cues and all sorts when we finish this, so we should make it like a noise or something. I don't know. Somewhere in the universe, someone is creating our universe. Well, that's far too deep for this chat. Now, we just like choosing things that are pink or dark blue or cyan, and then laughing at the bugs that I include into the code in real time. Ah, there we go. That's what I wanted to see. So, sort of, we're in connecting both planets at the same time there. Yeah, pretty good. Wouldn't it be better to iterate over all entities and decide what to do on the components instead of using multiple systems where you fetch all the entities with specific components? Possibly. is to do with all the components. Instead of using multiple systems where you fetch all the entities with specific components. I think that would sort of be what we do when we do start hitting a performance problem. Right now, I've got everything kind of broken out into very reusable little chunks of code, which I think when we're sort of fleshing out this idea, that's probably a better place to be in, because I don't know yet when and where I'm going to need this particular set of functionality. The other thing to remember is we're only iterating through 1,000 objects. That's nothing, not really. I don't envisage there actually being more than 1,000 objects in this particular implementation of the game. 1,000 objects is a lot of things for a player to keep track of. So I don't think we'll be going that deep. I realistically think in our solar system there may be something like 20 to 30 planets, and there'll be other bits of junk and things in there which they can go and explore. So I'm less concerned about any performance bottlenecks due to multiple looping. But what I do want in return is the ease of use of developing this. Don't forget I'm developing it live for a few hours a week. So by having it sort of compartmentalized like this, a really nice sort of reusable nugget of code that I can just sort of stick wherever I want. Didn't this project start with procedural generation stuff? No, this one didn't really start with procedural generation, no. It could potentially go into that procedural generation track of things. I think your cache would mess up iterating through entities. Yeah, but iterating 50 times over 1,000. I mean, we're not probably going to be iterating 50 times over 1,000. It's an interesting point, and I don't think anybody should discredit this because it is actually valid. But it's a case of we've got to do the sums, and I think this is a good point that Dursage is reading here. That not enough programmers, when they're planning a project, and don't forget we've not planned this one, not enough do the sums to actually make sure that the projects are viable in the first place. And you can do some simple back of an envelope calculation just to see, is it worth doing? Is your algorithm going to require 100 terabytes of RAM? That's easy enough to go and work out in advance, even if it's approximate. Are you going to require bandwidth, which is up there in the multiple gigabytes per second? These things become unreasonable. And I've seen it a few times on the Discord server where you get a developer who'll come up with an algorithm for something which cannot scale at all, or it cannot actually solve the problem in any realistic sense of time. Yeah, Herbal Dance, and we're having some fun fleshing it out, but these are totally valid questions, and yet I have no other ECS system to compare this performance to either. We're kind of trusting that Ent is, well, it's a good one. I haven't got another one to try it and compare it with. So we've selected, or at least we've potentially selected some objects. I guess we probably want to now change that to only happen when a mouse is clicked, right? It might be nice aesthetically to have that as something else, because if we go down to the actual click side of things, then that's a bit different. Because that would potentially mean we would have to run through the whole list again. So I'm going to do this just on click for the time being. So while we're in the middle of debating, are we going to be looping through things too often? Maybe okay. Let's be cautious about doing that and take it this way instead. So I'll only do this on get mouse button 1 dot be pressed. So that should now, he says optimistically, give us a permanent sort of highlighting, but only when I've clicked on the objects. It's not going to highlight. Oh, hang on, they're all highlighted. I think that's how we set it, wasn't it? That's not a good place to start. Where did we initialize the things? The things, I've lost them. There we go. False. So now I can click. No, nothing happening. What have I forgotten here? I've forgotten something very, very simple, surely. No clicks. If get mouse 1 is pressed, then we run through the list with the current mouse coordinate. We basically set everything to false except for the one that we've set. Huh. Interesting, interesting. This is where I need my Discord bot to start sort of spamming bugs all over the screen and that kind of thing. Which will be much closer to doing, because since I got Game Decider up and running again, with a couple of the changes that Twitch sort of inflicted upon us, my Twitch PegX is now working again. So I could go away and start working on that. Right, so get mouse 1 is pressed. That's going to run this section of code. What are we doing in system selectables then? So only now when it is clicked, we go through, compare all of the planets to make sure that that's legit. And we know that we've got a problem with the radii not being large enough. That's quite curious. Is it right click? Oh, hang on. Hang on. Yeah, Danderstein's there with the fix. My own off by 1 error. I think that'll be written on my tombstone. Off by 1 error. If only somebody could, potentially give us a PR with some names for these mouse buttons. There we go. And if I click elsewhere on the screen, it goes off. And click on you. And click on you. I can click on you. I can click on this little tiny one. Yes, I got it. There we go. And I can also click away. So if I click you, I can click in empty space, and we've deselected. Now, being selected and having one thing selected is going to sort of be the launch point for the next set of operations, and that's really where our state machines are going to kick in. Because things change based on what we've got selected. So what I kind of wanted to implement now was, once we've selected a planet, that we go into some sort of marker placement mode. That everything that's placed in the solar system fundamentally has to be attached to an object that exists in the solar system already. And ideally has to be something considered to be planet or moon. So we can't, for example, have satellites orbiting satellites. Right? It's got to be big enough that it's a clickable entity like this. So here we've got the planet selected. And the idea is, once it's selected and we're going into marker placement mode, it then lets me just drag out with the mouse, and it'll draw a line between the planet and where I am. And it'll also draw an orbital circle, because anything that we place in space is going to orbit the thing that we've selected. I surely didn't ask for a pull request. You have no evidence. How do you assure that on the point the user away click is not on another planet, yet far, far away? Well, if it's on... okay, so that one's selected. Okay, so if I click over here... Well, I don't quite understand the question, because I think if you've got a planet selected and your cursor is somewhere else when you click away and it's over a planet, well, that's the one you're going to select. That's how selection works. Can you query ent for an entity with selectable component where selected is true? That, I don't know. It would be quite a useful thing to be able to do. I know you can sort based on components, so maybe that is probably possible. I mean, you incur the cost of doing the sort, of course, if you do that. Well, I don't think I'm going to have the highlighting colour anymore. Maybe, I don't know. And I'm probably not going to stick with bright pink. I think we'll have, ultimately, it'll be a nice graphic sort of, I am highlighted this this planet. It's just, that's what I had to hand. I mean, if we wanted to be sort of really fancy about it, we could go and do that, right? Because instead, I could use this planet atmosphere graphic instead. So, planet atmosphere. Let's go and pick that. So instead of star surface, all the way up here, instead of, where is it? Star surface. This one we could have planet atmosphere. So it's no longer just a white disk. It's a more interesting shaped thing. Now, if we draw this, and then I can scale it a bit bigger as well. Oh, I'm going to have to change the name there, aren't I? Or else we're going to get an exception thrown now, or not. Anyway, it's not selected anything. That's not changed anything because planet atmosphere is the. I need to choose that name. That's the name I'm assigning. This is why I prefer to use an ID, I think, for the selection. There we go. So I'm going to put you there, and I'm going to scale you a little bit as well. Times 2. Yeah. So, we could do something very quickly like that as a selected planet instead. Maybe make it a little less transparent, change the nature of how it's interacting with the scene. But very quickly you can start adding a slightly more professional polish to things just by changing the graphics. But right, I'm working with programmer art for the time being. I mean, that looks pretty cool. It's probably not contrasty enough with the background. If you zoomed out, we'll never really be zoomed out this far at any point, I don't think. I think that's probably the maximum zoom out we'll ever exist at. And the sun shouldn't be selectable. Excellent, good. We most likely will have a debug toggle mode at some point because we're going to start getting into the interesting game stuff soon, and that's going to require knowing what's going on behind the scenes whilst we're debugging. Because we're drawing this in additive mode, it's really interacting nicely with the background there. It's cool. So that's a cheap way to reuse one of the graphics that we're using in the game. Yeah, I like that. We'll leave it like that for a bit. Sorry, I'm just reading the text. Well, yeah, the ECS will look like the one in Unity. I've not used the one in Unity, but I mean, ECS is reasonably ECS everywhere you go. It's just loads of different implementations of it. And we're not necessarily using it for the performance reasons here. The reason I like to use it is I think it's easier to make the composite of the objects that we're going to be working with without needing to recompile the code. And that's where I think the community can really start having an impact, because then I can just throw it open to you guys to say, right, come and create some interesting space station parts or create some interesting objects that exist in this game. And then it becomes like a really community project, because all you have to do is provide scripts of how things behave and what they look like and where they should be and that kind of thing. Yes, Herbal Dance is a good circle. So, right, now we want to start thinking about changing states. Because our first state, I mean, we pick states at random to begin with. Where's our state machine gone? State machine. Idle is where we were sort of operating in at the moment. But idle doesn't really exist. I just like to have an idle state. Really, that state was the select planet state. So that's probably where we should put our state machine to start. So I'm going to default our state machine to select planet. Idle we'll use as a fallback for maybe a pause menu or something like that. These are likely to change as we go around. So in the select planet state, that's when we're actually going to be calling our system select function. So we're going to need to duplicate our state machine a little bit, I think. Excuse me. That one's handling the pan and zoom effects. Now, the way the camera is manipulated is going to change based on the game state. So I think I'm going to leave that there. And a lot of those states are going to be, excuse me, going to be quite the same. But for actual interaction, pan and zoom doesn't affect the simulation. That's purely a rendering state for the next frame. So that can stay there. But we probably do need to duplicate our simulation for up here. So when we're idle, it's going to do nothing. Excuse me. And when we're in select planet mode, that's when we're going to call our system select selectables. And I think we want to get this to return a flag that says whether anything is selected or not. Now there's probably an nth way to do that, which we've just been discussing. Is there a way to find anything that's been selected? But given that really we're operating on one thing at a time in order to change the next state, might not be the case when we're dragging a rectangle to highlight a bunch of ships or something. But for now, just select planet. You select one thing at a time. So maybe alter our select selectables to just quickly spit out a Boolean in the event that at least one thing is selected. That should do it, I think. So we're going through, and if it's false, or is it with itself, it stays false, or until it's set to true, and then once it's set to true once, it remains true all the way through the rest of the loop. It tells us at least one thing is selected. Should there be a camera entity? Maybe. Maybe that's something later to start thinking about. Possibly, maybe not. Still need to finish the selection. Well, the selection, we've selected the planet now, and we're going to do something with the selection. At what point do you decide to make each state a small class rather than an enum case? That is a good question. It possibly will go that way, but it's being careful not to abuse it, because it's easy to go, and we've discussed this in a previous episode, that you can just suddenly have this, I'm going to create all of these classes that are going to inherit from game state, and then I'm going to stick all of these things on a stack, and we're going to maintain the state machine, and that's just nasty. It's not a nice way to do things. So a bit of enum duplication costs pretty much nothing at all in comparison to the limitations and the restrictions of a fairly complicated object-oriented approach. And this is why I wanted to do this series in particular with a not particularly object-orientated approach to solving the problems. I think it's interesting, and it's controversial, particularly for the viewers who, throughout all of my channel, have seen me do oop this and oop that and everything, to actually move away from it a little bit. And for me, this is like programming back in the 90s. You didn't necessarily have the oop there to hold your hand. But at the same time, in the 90s, we wrote things and we had lots of duplication. It's just the nature of how the code worked. Keeping logic separated rather than having it all in one file, just splitting the code up mostly. And that's something that I do need to do. I can't deny that one. We're getting to the point now when we're spending more time scrolling up and down this file than we are actually coding anything. So once we have selected a planet, then our next state changes. Ooh, what did I call them? State next? Yeah. Now, we don't know what the state's going to be yet. What were the states? Space station new. Choose orbital location. That sounds about right, doesn't it? What did I call the enum? I've completely forgotten. Yes, state with a capital S. Sorry. State. Choose orbital location. So if that's true, then we go into choose orbital location down here. So what should happen now when I run it is we're going to get stuck in this state. So I should be able to select a planet once, and then we're stuck until we decide to do something which cancels that selection. And that's an important thing to start thinking about now, and not sort of bodge in later. It's how do you go backwards from your user's perspective. You don't want your user to have to complete a particular sequence of operations in order to get out of that modality. I find that very annoying in games. I just want to press escape, and I end up back to a known state as quickly as possible. Although I have to be careful, because right now if I press escape, I'm going to exit the program. So I have to remap that. But what this should allow now is we are in the choose planet state. I can select a planet. But yeah, I can't move anywhere else. And I can't even pan and zoom because we've not added that state to the pan and zoom for the camera holder later on. So that's very good. So it looks like a complete lockup, but it's a desirable complete lockup. While watching the stream, you remembered you should install Visual Studio 2019. So much software to install. Yeah, it installs much better than it used to. I'll give it that. Now it's a very quick install, Visual Studio. And people say, oh, it takes hundreds of gigabytes on my hard drive, therefore you've got to use Vim. If you're using Visual Studio, you're just not a programmer, man. And it's just not true. Right, camera. So that was it. We don't want to lose control of the camera. So that was in here. So this is the same camera manipulation. Choose orbital location. Perfect. So when we're choosing an orbital location, we probably now need to draw some additional stuff. And that's where we'll probably need yet another enumeration. Always range objects. What's this doing? That can't be doing anything. No, that's dud. That's not necessary. You get rid of that comment as well. It means doesn't make any sense. So now I want to draw a line from the selected object. Now I can actually break early now on here because we're basically only going to be selecting one thing. But the only reason I'm not breaking early is because I want to make sure that I set all of the other things that I've not selected back to false. Alter, do they really sound like that? Yes, they do. Remember the first version on 6 DVDs? I had Visual Studio 6, and that came with the MSDN discs on CD as well. It was really good having a copy of the MSDN. So what do I want this to do? So do I want this to now return the selected entity? It's interesting. Because I'm going to need that. I'm going to need to know which of my objects was actually selected. Interesting problem to solve. I was one of those guys that tried to install Windows 95 from floppy disk, and that took forever. Well, I was thinking that, Dandestein, but what happens if nothing's selected? What does it actually return? I don't know what the null entity is, nor do I know what it does. Is ent null a thing? Is that actually an acceptable... Okay, so there is an ent null. Right. Okay, that's good to know then. Right, fair enough. That's the right way to do that then. Ent null is falsy, yeah, okay. If we happen to be selecting two planets on top of each other, which can exist in this scenario but won't exist in the final product, because the planets will always be sort of orbiting sensibly. Oh, is that true? Can I guarantee that? I don't think I can guarantee that. Particularly if we do sort of randomly generate the solar system. It would be quite difficult. We'd need Ericsson on the maths on that one to identify whether the planets potentially overlap with each other as part of the orbit chains. I don't think they would, because we'd choose sort of sensible distances between the planets and its moons and things, so that it's unlikely that they would overlap each other. Yeah, I think selecting multiple things, that's going to be a slightly different modality, because that would imply sort of ships. So I would use, in that instance, a select ships system instead. You wouldn't randomize the distance to the sun. You'd randomize the distance to the previous orbit. Well, yeah, I think potentially they could, Dandestein, if we weren't careful with that. Yeah, I'm going to return the base is going to be the last one that's selected. So if this is true at any point, selectable. Oh, come on. Selectable dot be selected. The entity we're going to return. We'll store it up here. The two T's is killing me. What do they call it? E-selected. Right, so now... Oh, so that has to be not equal to null, I guess. I'm not going to be able to do it like that, am I? Because I actually need to cache this thing. Okay, so I think we do need then a currently selected planet variable, effectively global variable, but Selected planet isn't quite the right... Oh, it is, because we're in select planet mode and we're selecting selectables. Well, we may have to readjust the terminology a little bit there. Right, so M selected planet is going to be this. Regardless, now, if that comes back as null pointer, that's completely acceptable. If it's not equal to null, choose orbital location. Yep, and we want to set... No, that's it. That's all we need. Because it's going to be set to null, and choose orbital location is going to be where we do something interesting with it. Let's just make sure that all compiles. The ent null is new to me tonight, so that's something I'm just learning about. So we should be able to select a planet. We can't select anything because now we're in the next phase of the orbital selection, so that's good, but we've now got our pan and zoom because we added the camera switch statement in, so that's all seems okay. Now, the one that I keep getting, and it always happens to me on stream, but fortunately we've not had a problem with it recently because I've not been doing the particular word. But I always do this when I'm creating a class. That one. That's the one I do more than any of the others. Which is terrible for live streaming. If E planet is selected, wouldn't it be good to zoom in and lock the panning? Yeah, probably. Well, we'll one step at a time. We've got to do. It probably will be following the planet. We did actually implement cameras to do that, but right now I'm going to have to bring those in. And it's actually a fortunate time because we have reached the end of tonight's show. So I can perhaps go and put that camera panning back in that can lock onto a particular planet. And we'll have that ready for next time where we can start adding in the next phase of being able to select a particular orbital point and showing this information. Because once we've been able to place this point, that's when we can start building the space station. Once we can put the space stations in space and have them orbiting, then we can start thinking about the game mechanics, and I think that that's very, very exciting. A big thanks to Sage tonight because lots of interesting discussion points been brought up. So if you're just catching the stream now, do check the VOD. I think there's some really good and poignant questions being asked about ECS systems, probably worthy of some debate on the Discord server, certainly. If you're not on the Discord server, come and join in. Until then, thank you very much, everybody, and take care of yourselves. I'll see you on Friday. Yes, take care.